I'd like to call this Thursday, October 1st, 2020 Finance Committee meeting to order. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapters 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Town of the Chelmsford Finance Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information, the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website at www.chelmsfordma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so by accessing the Chelmsford Telemedia website, www.chelmsfordtv.org. No in-person attendance of the members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the town's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Please note that if you would like to watch this meeting but do not plan to present to the committee or speak during public comment, we ask you please do so at live.chelmsfordtv.org or on your television, Comcast 99 or Verizon 37. By doing so, you will help reduce demand on the online meeting platform. Thank you. I'd also like to remind people that the chat box is a public record. Anything sent both to everyone and privately will be made part of the public record. First on our agenda this evening is approval of minutes. So we have two sets of minutes. We have an August 27th, 2020 set and the September 17th, 2020 set. Did everyone have a chance to look at the August 27th set?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Do you have a motion?
I make a motion that we accept the August 27th meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Hands are up.
Right.
Thank you. And the September 17th, 2020 set. Did everybody have a chance to review those?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Do you have a motion?
I make a motion that we accept the September 17th meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
All those in favor? Just a hands will do fine. Thank you. So it's 7-0 on both, Pam. Thank you. All right, moving right along. We have a presentation, review, and discussion of warrant Article 8, Parker Road Parcel 102-410-4. And with us this evening is David McLaughlin from the Conservation Commission. And I will pull up that article right now as you requested, David. Just give me a second. All right, can everyone see the slide?
Yes.
Right. All right, Dave, thank you for coming this evening.
Thanks for having me. I'm Dave McLaughlin. I'm chairman of the Chelmsford Conservation Commission. This article is to acquire about 1/10 of an acre of land. As most of you know, the Conservation Commission manages about 1,100 acres of land in Chelmsford, most of which are reservations that are open to the public, some of which are just open land that we use for wildlife refuge. Today, I think, we completed the purchase of the Warren Pole Farm, which is that piece of land which is just directly north of the blue sliver of land on Parker. I think most of you are aware of it. It's between Boston Road and Bartlett Street and Hall Ave and Parker Road or Parker Avenue. Over the years, Conservation Commission prioritizes space that, if it became available, would lend itself to being conservation land. The Warren Pole parcel was one of those parcels. And what we try to do when we acquire land is to create connections between conservation land. This parcel that is on Parker, owned by the Spanos family, is exactly that. To the south, I assume it's north and south, but for your viewing, you can assume it is the Wright Reservation, which is about 96 acres of land. And now to the north of that is the Warren Pole Farm, which is 51 acres of land. And as you can see, that sliver that's marked in blue is the piece that we'd like to acquire so that we can evaluate making a direct connection between the Warren Pole Farm and the Wright Reservation. From the Wright Reservation, citizens can also walk up to Robin Hill and can walk even further south as far down as Concord Road. So this would be probably the biggest connecting parcels of conservation land that the town has. So I hope you approve it.
All right. Does anybody have any questions?
What is the depth of the parcel on each of the ends? It looks west and east.
What do you mean by depth?
Is it a certain number of feet at the end? You know, it's an interesting shape. So,
Well, to the right side of it is more of Wright Reservation, and to the left side, Lord only knows how that parcel existed or was created in the first place. The Spanos family has other property in town. There was never a building on it. I have no idea. Maybe it was created when Parker Avenue or Parker Road was built. I have no idea.
I was curious whether it's walkable or whether when you're connecting it, a car would drive between the two. I was wondering what your consideration was.
We really haven't had any discussions, but I think if anything, and we obviously need to talk to the residents because Parker Road has a history. The idea would be to have a pathway coming from the Warren Pole Farm with a crosswalk at Parker and then directly into Wright Reservation. We might expand the Wright Reservation parking, but the Warren Pole property hopefully will have its own parking.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
Thanks for having me first.
Thanks, Dave. Have a good evening.
Good night.
All right. I'm just going to stop share for a second. All right. Next on our agenda, we have the presentation, review, and discussion of warrant articles 11, 12, 14, and 15, which are all in relation to the tax levy. With us this evening is the citizen petitioner, Paul J. Regazio. Thank you, Paul, for being here this evening. Let me just unmute you. Hold on one second.
Unmute.
There you are. You should be off mute now.
So you can hear me now?
We can. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm on.
You are on.
Okay, again, my name is Paul Regazio. I'm a town meeting rep, precinct 3. And thank you for allowing me to explain the 4 articles that I posted earlier this year. Again, the articles, well, my overall objective back in August when these were filed was to eliminate the 2.5% budgeted property tax increase that was in the approved budget. So again, which is about $2.5 million that the town was expecting to receive in tax levy from the citizens. We now know that additional state funding of about 1.5 million is to reduce this so that the net increase under the revised budget is about $1 million, so that the tax levy is going to increase. The budget, approved budget, is going to increase taxes from the townspeople by about $1 million. And again, we now know that there's free cash of about $1.37 million that's available. My comment is, in a pandemic year, this is not the time to raise taxes. Now about $1 million, or to put surplus funds into the stabilization fund. This takes money out of the local out of the local economy. Let's help our taxpayers and the local economy by keeping the money in the economy local. Just a little backdrop. I am in agreement with the recently passed budget as adjusted, except as I said, for the $1 million tax increase that's expected. My first warrant is to apply the 1 million of the free cash to offset the budgeted property tax increase and put that money into our residents' hands and the local businesses that are suffering. We all know this is a tough year for a lot of people who have lost their jobs, businesses, restaurants, stores that have closed. So hold on one second, I'm losing my track. Okay. The addition of the 1 million to the local economy, with an economic build-up or 2 times or 3 times, we're going to be helping the local economy by putting this money into the local economy. Also, taking $2 million out of the stabilization fund, which the budget did, and as the later article says, put 1.3 million back into the stabilization fund, really doesn't make any sense. I know how it happened, but it really doesn't make sense in presenting it to the people. My second warrant is to transfer the remainder of the free cash, which is about $370,000. Again, to apply that against the budgeted tax increase. The same reasons apply. Let's put this money back into the local economy and help our local people. This amazingly, I understand, will result in a very small tax decrease over the prior levy. Is there any rule that says we can't have a tax decrease? I know sometimes miracles do happen, and let's make one happen this year. My third warrant was to request the transfer of $1 million from the stabilization fund and apply it to the current tax levy. Again, this warrant now, based on my original objective to eliminate the 2.5 million, is the objective has been achieved, okay, by the free cash and by the extra state funds available. However, since the warrant has been filed, I'm going to leave it up to the town reps to decide whether the additional property tax reduction is needed or approved. I'm going to let the people decide. As Ronald Reagan, I have to add this in, as Ronald Reagan once said, don't give them, that is the government, the money, because they'll just spend it. And again, what I want to do is to help the, the local economy, the local taxpayers. The fourth warrant is probably unneeded and can be overlooked or vacated or whatever the appropriate word is in the town meeting process. So again, I want to eliminate the $2.5 million tax increase that was originally in the budget. I want to transfer monies from the free cash to apply against the current year taxes. And if the town people want to apply another $1 million against the tax, that's fine by me. Again, the stabilization fund, even after these transfers, is still going to be about $9 million. And I see no reason why we can't approve all of them. So if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to discuss them to you.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions? Seeing none.
All right, thank you. Thank
Just,
you.
Paul, I actually just had one quick question for you. So should and I know that these were set in here a certain way because of the way they're set up.
Right.
I'm imagining that should the first 1 or 2 not be successful, you're looking for your ultimate goal is to have the first 3 of your articles be successful in their position.
The first 2, definitely. The third one, I'm going to leave that up to the taxpayer. Again, because that was mainly because I thought the original tax increase was $2.5 million, and the free cash has the extra state funding has eliminated that need. So
Okay.
the third article, I'm going to leave up to the town people. I probably will vote for it, but I will leave it up to the town reps as to whether they want to do that.
Okay. So you're basically covering your bases here with these 4 separate articles.
But yes,
Okay. All right. Thank you.
thank you. We'll see you at the town meeting. So take care. God bless.
You as well.
Thank you.
Pull up my agenda here. Next on our agenda this evening, we have a presentation, review, and discussion of warrant Article 16, the historical preservation and reuse. With us this evening, we have Nancy Airway of the Planning Board, and also I think Deb DeVerna is also on from the Historic District Commission.
This is Deb Taverna. I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can, yes, thank you.
I want to correct it. I'm the Historical Commission, not the district for this bylaw.
Oh, okay.
Just for the record.
All right.
Is Nancy here?
I am.
Yes, yes.
All right. So if you folks have the presentation available, I don't know if you can, somebody can pull it up.
I don't have your updated presentation, Nancy. All I have is the one from the previous.
From the previous. All right. I'm not sure what previous that would be.
The one that was in the initial town meeting warrant article presentation.
Okay. So you have, then I'm going to have to talk you through this because I don't have it on the computer that
Excuse me, this is Virginia. I have
I'm
what you
logged into.
presented. I'm
I'm jumping between computers here.
I have what Nancy presented to the Board of Selectmen. If that's the presentation, I'd be happy to share my screen.
Thank you, Virginia. Could you please?
All right, hold on one second.
I just need somebody
Yeah.
to give me the ability.
Dan, can we get that in? It's not letting me allow ours to share. Hold on one second. I wonder if you could. Excellent, thank you.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, Virginia. All right, the presentation, I supplied 2 files. One is the map that shows affected properties or potentially affected properties. And the second is a 22-page PowerPoint presentation. That PowerPoint presentation is divided into 3 sections. A title page, sheets 1 through 7 are the town warrant article, all the legalese. And I'm not going to read it to you. I'll certainly let you do that yourself. So if we go to page 8, it starts the actual presentation of it. And then the last section is simply a listing of properties that could be affected by it, which again, I will not go through in detail, but they're there for your reference. So the purpose of this bylaw is historic preservation of critical historic resources within the town of Chelmsford. This is the 3rd year that we have tried to put through a historic preservation bylaw. We keep learning from the feedback, and hopefully this year we have it right. Basically, we keep reducing the scope, and we're down to a handful of very critical properties at this point. So the reason that we need this, the entire region is under high stress, high demand for housing. Chelmsford has become a very in-demand location because of our proximity to highways, the investment we make in our school system, and our investments in our in maintaining our open spaces, and everything else that we're putting this budget into. We have made it into the top 50 places to live in the United States. We've done such a good job, but that brings its own challenges. We have very, very few vacant buildable lots left in town, and replacements being seen by the developers as the alternative to fulfill that demand for new housing. That replacement creates a significant risk to our historic residential architecture. So the purpose of this article is not to create more buildable lots, but rather it's to provide incentives to owners and developers to preserve the existing historic structures that exist. Virginia, could you go to the next slide? Thank you. So the limitations we have, there is no legal publicly funded vehicle for preservation of private properties. If we were talking about public properties, the CPC funds could be used and we could provide incentive programs that way. But because these are private properties, we can't use public funding. The prohibition of destruction is simply not an option. Owners have the right to do what they want with their property. The demolition delay that we have in place is only permitted for a short period of time. Currently, it's at 1 year, and it's not making much impact in terms of keeping these properties. We're seeing one after another that goes into demolition delays and comes out the other side and is raised. But preservation restrictions do protect a property, but they in turn have some limitations. We can't impose a preservation restriction on an owner. We can ask them for it, but they're the ones that have to sign up for it. We can set the terms of it or negotiate the terms of it, but it's still the owner that has to, it's basically a lien on a property. They have a limited lifespan. They're not forever. And most owners are not going to accept those limitations on their future use of the property without some sort of payback. So that's what this bylaw is all about, is to create a legal payback system to buy preservation restrictions. Next slide. Like I said, it's basically the current currency that we have at our disposal to buy a preservation restriction from the owners. Next slide. Okay, so what is a historic preservation restriction? It's a voluntary legal agreement, and that's used to protect significant historic resources. It provides assurances that the property will not be destroyed in the future, and it has very specific requirements written into it. It's filed at the Registry of Deeds and it runs with the land, so it's not limited to the current owner. Usually focuses on the exterior architectural features of a property, but it can be used on interior spaces as well. The heart of it is the grantor's covenants. These are spelled out as prohibited activities, and they're typically worked out with the holder of the preservation restriction, which would typically be the Historic Commission. Another important part of it is that it creates a baseline of documentation that identifies what the property's historic significance is, what the existing conditions are, and it's a baseline for measurement of any changes to the property in the future. Again, these are typically 30-year and they're renewable. Next slide. So the properties that we have identified that would be affected by this bylaw fit into 5 different classes. The first class is properties, well, first I should say, In discussions with the Historic Commission, they decided that in order to try to get this bylaw through this time, we would limit it to properties no later than 1800. In the past, we were looking at properties that went up through 1938, when our zoning bylaws were created, or 75-year-old properties. So the crux of this bylaw is that it allows a historic property to have land split off of it to create another building lot. And it allows undersized lots in order to do that. So there's two options. One is that the original lot holding the historic property and the lot that's split off can be half-sized. And the other option is that a rear lot could be created that effectively would also be half-sized. So our pipe stem lots, rear lots, currently require 80,000 square feet, and this would allow a 40,000 square foot rear lot. So those lot sizes are what create these 5 categories. So properties under 40,000 square feet that are currently under 40,000 square feet would not qualify to use this bylaw. You simply can't get 2 half-size lots out of a non-conforming lot. There are 25 pre-1801 properties in that class, and 10 of them have already been classified as historically significant by the Historic Commission. Classes 2 through 4 could gain benefits from this bylaw. Class 2 is properties between 40,000 and 60,000 square feet. They would be conforming lots. There's 24 of them, of which 11 are pre-qualified as historically significant. Anything other than those 11 would have to go through an assessment for whether they're historically significant in order to use this bylaw. And this class, this size range, could be split into 2 half-sized lots. The class 3 properties, there's 7 of them, 3 of which are currently considered historically significant. They're between 60,000 and 80,000 square feet. They may qualify for the 2 half-size lot split, or they might be able to qualify for the back lot split because they're over 60,000 square feet. So you could potentially get a minimum 20,000 plus a minimum 40,000 back lot out of them. And the class 4 properties between 80 and 100 would qualify for a 2-lot split, but this bylaw may allow them to qualify for a back lot split. The class 5 properties, there's 7 of them, 3 of which are currently historically significant status, are big enough that they would already qualify for either one of these splits without this bylaw. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the next 2 slides are the same as the other file, and the other file, I guarantee you, is easier to read than these 2 slides. They're color-coded for those 5 classes. So you can find the locations on the map. Okay, next slide. So when we talk about may qualify or might qualify, what are we talking about? To use this bylaw, a property has to meet a number of qualifications. 1, it has to be considered historically significant. So that was the minor number in those classes on the previous page. If it's not already qualified as historically significant, it would have to go through an evaluation by the Historic Commission to determine that it was prior to submitting a building plan or a split plan, a subdivision plan. It has to have sufficient area to qualify, and the area has to be buildable, not significant wetlands. So I have no way to tell you which of these properties have enough buildable area. You know, I can tell you they have enough area, but I can't tell you they have enough buildable area without literally going through every one of their plot plans on the wetlands map. The existing building has to be located in a place on the property that allows for separation. So if you have a 40,000 conforming 40,000 square foot lot, but the building sits smack dab in the middle of it, you'll never get two 20,000 square foot lots out of it because it simply doesn't support it. And it must have conforming area and frontage to qualify for two lots that have half of the conforming area and frontage. So not only does it have to have the area, it's going to have the frontage to be able to do this split. So the bottom line on this is there's not a lot of properties that it's going to benefit, but we believe that it will benefit some, and we believe that the ones that it will benefit are absolutely critical to the history of the town. Next slide. So people asked, isn't a 20,000 square foot lot too small? Half-sized lot. Well, about a third of our RB lots and 70% of our RC lots are already less than 20,000 square feet. Non-conforming lots are prevalent within Chelmsford. A consistent use of the 40,000 square foot lots is typically found only in our new subdivisions. All of our older areas were never built to that standard. And these smaller lots that we're proposing here are only being used as a method to buy preservation restriction on a few properties. So the table down below shows you, is just a reference from the assessor's database that shows you in the third column how many are actually compliant to the requirements, what percentage, and how many are, what percentage is less than 50% of the requirements. So in RA, 74% of the properties are less than 50% of the required area. In RB, a third of them are less than 50% of the required area. And in RC, 25% are less than the required area. Probably more significant is the ones that actually meet, which is that third column. And it's not very high. So next slide. Do we have a next slide?
Oh.
Virginia, thank you. Okay, so how is this bylaw different than the one that was rejected last year? Well, first of all, there's no unit density bonus on the houses themselves. We got rid of the 3-family extensions. Secondly, there's a lot fewer properties involved because we moved the applicable age from 1938 back to 1800. That pretty drastically changes it. There's currently less than 15 pre-qualified properties based on historic value. Previously, last year, there were 118 that were pre-qualified. So this bylaw focuses on our colonial and Georgian construction, typically the original farmhouses. It offers no protection on the Victorian era structures that make up most of our historic town centers. And I think this is my last, yep, okay. So the rest of these slides you're welcome to look at. I'm certainly not picking through them. It provides the addresses and the data, assessor's office data. This is all publicly available data through the GPS system on the properties that fit into these classes. The queries are based on the actual year built and the square footage of the properties. One of the things you'll find here that you guys might find of interest is the land value to total value ratios. An awful lot of these properties tend to have a very, very large percentage of their value in the land, not the structures. So, any questions? Dan,
I've
do you
got
want to add anything?
I would like to add something. I believe at one time I was given the number that we have about 19,000 homes in Chelmsford. So this could possibly affect 40 of those properties. I know it's a really small amount, but these are our oldest buildings, and once they're gone, they're gone. A restriction or a covenant only protects the exterior of these buildings. Very seldom are we allowed to put a restriction on the interior. It'd have to be something just spectacular for us to do that. But we realize that these homes need to be livable. But the restriction would at least allow us to keep the exterior period appropriate. And it's just, we're going to lose these houses and we need to keep them. And I realize, okay, I'm sorry.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
I know that we have a lot of Victorian houses and those really affect our town centers. But I think we can work with those a little bit better than we can these early historical houses. It's a different kind of house. I'm sorry, go ahead now.
I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. Is 40,000 square feet an acre?
Not quite, it's actually 0.92.
Okay, so, okay. Okay, so now I see what you mean about newer developments, because I live in the Hitching Post. I think that was in the 70s and 80s, and I think all the lots in here are 0.92 or thereabouts. But
yeah.
So then my other question is, what do you mean by back lot? You keep using that phrase, like, so I'm envisioning a square or a rectangle, I guess. And what do you mean by backlot development? Like the house would be behind the first house? I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Yeah, I can explain that. So a standard lot development has a fairly large frontage. A backlot development has a frontage on the road that's only wide enough to put in a driveway. So sometimes it's referred to as a pipe stem lot. The bulk of the lot is behind someone else's lot, but it has a narrow piece of land where the driveway goes into it.
Okay. I see. Now I have one final question. So they have a house and it applies and the lot can be divided and they start to go ahead and build on the other half of their property, the new structure. Are there any limitations about the style of that new structure? Are there any limits on what they can build?
Within the constraints of the allowable size, no. We do not have any architectural limitations either built into this or anywhere else in our bylaws. We have a few incentives under the COID for specific types of architecture, but it is absolute, the COID itself, because it's an overlay, is an option to use that the owner or developer chooses. So there's nothing mandated in our bylaws that they have.
How close to the property line can you build? Because eventually this is going to be two pieces of property. So how close, and I'm sorry, probably everybody else knows all this stuff backwards and forward. How close to the property line can you build?
So the distance from the property line on a standard conforming lot for RB, and all of these properties are RB, is 40-foot frontage, 30-foot rear, and 25-foot sides. So in a situation where we're allowing the dimensions to be halved, you're still going to have that amount between those two structures that are created.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Anita, I believe you had a question.
I have a question. Yeah, so I thought I heard that lots that were, in essence, under 40,000 square feet could not be split.
That's right. Because
Where
you
does
can't
it say
get,
that in the bylaw?
Anita,
Yeah,
the two lots that are created have to be at least half sized. So if I'm
okay.
creating two 20,000 square foot lots, half sized, I have to start with something that's at least 40,000.
Does it say that in the bylaw? So I wasn't sure if I saw that. I was just wanting to make sure that that was there.
The bylaw allows you to create two half-sized lots.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
And then my other question is, so say someone comes through the process, does this, splits their lot into two, sells both lots. What prevents the new owner from not coming in and demolishing the house and rebuilding and saying it's, 10 years later, right? Two new owners.
Could you go through that again? Because you broke up on a little bit of it.
Okay, so someone owns one of these homes today. They come through this whole process and they split the lots. They build another house on the other lot, sell it, and then 10 years later decide to sell their own house. And a new owner comes in. What is preventing them from demolishing the house?
Preventing them from what?
Buying the old historical house and demolishing it.
The preservation restriction does. It runs with the land. It transfers to the new owner. So the new owner would be buying the house with the preservation restriction on it.
It's set
that's given by, but that's not in the bylaw. That's in some other, like who's imposing that and where does it say that, I guess is my question.
Yeah, the bylaw covers the fact that this can only be done with a preservation restriction.
But it doesn't say that they can't. It says it shall have these types of things in it, but it doesn't say specific. Am I reading this wrong? I mean, I could be reading this wrong.
So it says, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nancy and Deb, it says conditions to be imposed, and I think I have that slide up, and tell me if I don't. If the planning board grants a special permit for historic preservation, it shall impose as minimum conditions the following. And it lists these conditions, 1, 2, and 3, including the historic preservation restriction. And
Okay.
so shall is not permissive, shall is.
That's a requirement. Yeah.
Requirement. Okay. No, I just wanted to make sure I was reading this correctly. Thank you.
Something I would add too, this is Deb, is on any properties with a preservation restriction or covenant, the historical commission goes out once a year and does inspections of the exteriors of these properties. And if there are any problems found, we start working with the owner to get those corrected.
Okay, none of the properties currently in town have this restriction?
We do have 3 properties that have restrictions now that the
Okay.
historical commission is in charge of.
Okay, okay.
I guess that leads me to one other somewhat odd question. So what are the tax implications? Now, say I own this property, I've got the covenant or the prevention on there, preservation, whatever. So there are things I can't do to my home because they're historical. Is that a different tax rate, or is that you get, I don't know, what is there a tax implication to that as far as your residential value?
Deb, have you ever heard of a property value being reduced because of a preservation restriction? Because
No,
most
I
of the time
haven't.
what I hear is that it increases the property values because of the maintenance that has to be performed on it.
Right, because the restriction itself says the property must be maintained in good order. So because of that, I have not seen any downing in the value.
Okay, thank you. It just, you know,
I have a question as well.
Sure.
Sorry.
Vicky?
I'm curious, are variances allowed with the setbacks with the split with these? I think you covered that last year, but I'm not sure how that applies this year. So if a property were to be purchased and split, is there a variance board that would possibly consider allowing things that go against what is presented in these articles?
The variance process, okay, so this bylaw requires a special permit from the planning board, and it provides for no reduction from the half, the 50%, after the 50% reduction. Anything in the bylaws theoretically can go before the ZBA for variances. And, you know, that's no different with this or without this.
Okay.
It really doesn't modify that at all. Speaking of ZBA, I have a need to get there like now.
Sorry to bother.
All right.
Sorry, I
Vicky,
just-
that brought up a
Yeah.
great, just on the zoning variance, didn't we pass was it last town meeting, we passed that zoning bylaw that if you're within a certain percentage of like the setbacks, I forget what it was specifically, and I forget which one, but you didn't have to go in front of the ZBA?
We did.
And would that apply to this? So, and I'm just thinking like side setbacks, right? So if you have 25 feet side
That's what I'm
setback, this would
thinking.
allow for 15 feet side, sorry, no, 12 and a half feet setback. Then that other zoning bylaw, would that then allow it to be even less without having to go through the ZBA?
I don't believe so, but that's probably a question for legal.
Yeah, that would be a question for legal, Anita. We have to look. I know which one you're referencing. You're referencing the. It was fall town meeting last year. We passed a zoning bylaw that provided for residents of a certain age to have the zoning bylaws applied that were in effect at the time that building was constructed. And so I understand the concern you might have that would apply here, where they wouldn't have to go through the appeal process if they for somehow were able to apply the zoning bylaws in effect at the date of the building of this property. So that's an interesting question, and I think we're going to need an opinion from legal on that question, because I'm not going to give it.
I can't answer that. That's a ZBA question, and I just can't answer that. Speaking of which, I need to get to that meeting. So do you have anything else fast, guys?
Since you initially brought this up 3 years ago, I know the scope has changed every year since then. It's gotten a little tighter. Have any houses that would have been under this initially been demolished? Have we lost anything?
That's a question for Deb.
Excellent.
Question.
Thanks, Nancy. You
I
can head
think
off.
we may
Thank
have
you.
lost one in that time
Thank you.
period.
I'm sorry.
Excellent.
I'm sorry, Deb.
I think we may have lost one in that 3-year time period.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So I believe Nancy has jumped off, and thank her for coming and speaking this evening again. Are there any specific questions for Debbie regarding the historic preservation? All right, I'm seeing none. Thank you, Debbie, for being on tonight as well.
Thank you.
I'll make sure I'll use your right committee next time.
That's okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bear with me. I have multiple screens here. I'll pull back up my agenda. But next on our agenda is the discussion of warrant article 17 regarding the wildlife feeding bylaw. I do believe I saw Ken on the line for that. I know the select board is the proponent of that particular article. Ken, are you on?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
So thank you. I just want to let you know that I have a guest with me, Ed Baroda, who's a resident who brought this to the board's attention and asked for this warrant article to be sent to town meeting. And I also just want to thank you folks for, hosting us, and thank you, Jim, I assume, for spelling my last name right.
It's not that hard.
We'll start from there. Yeah, they usually do a capital F though, so. So I'll just start off by saying, I was contacted by Ed Baroda, who lives out on the Chelmsford Westford line, and he was having an issue with a flock of wild turkeys that has been being ground fed for a few years now, and he can tell you more about that in a second. And it's grown in size, and it's become quite a nuisance. And I'll let him tell his story, but before I do that, since this town meeting warrant article was proposed, I have had several other residents in town. There's a residence over off of 129 that has a large flock of turkeys that's grown from ground feeding. There's off of North Road, someone who contacted me who their neighbor puts a tray of food out every night at 10 o'clock for what started off as 2 skunks, and now it's up to 5. They take the tray in at midnight, and I have driven by and seen the skunks out there feeding. So there is a lot of this going on, and it's not fair to the animals, and it's not what it was meant to be, and that's where this came from. So Ed, thank you for being patient on hold tonight with me and joining us. And if you could just give a little background
sure. Thank you.
what your situation was and how you found the warrant article and so forth.
Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah, and Ed, just for the record, if you do your full name and your address, please.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. It's Edward Baroda, 31 Long Meadow Road.
Thank you.
And our last name is Boroda.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you again for having me on. So as Ken stated, what brought this to the attention of the town or the town officials was just, this overwhelming frustration of the flock of turkeys that pretty much resided in my backyard, from like different times of the day. And it wasn't just my house. A lot of the houses on our street as well. So my initial call was actually to the Board of Health here in Chelmsford. And I can't recall exactly who I spoke to, but they were very nice in guiding me and giving me resources and giving me some tips on how to, deter the wild turkeys. But unfortunately, it was from actually feeding. One of our neighbors feeding the turkeys. I just was against, any. I didn't have options, so I did start some research, and I did find out that in neighboring Westford, it was already an ordinance restricting feeding wildlife in their bylaws. So I did go ahead and got a copy of it and provided it to Ken and the board, and then that started the process to actually review what the language of that particular article, and then it was revised and amended to reflect pretty much what would fit the town of Chelmsford. So by way of background, I can say that I was in touch with several other state officials who really couldn't do much because it was more of a local, issue. So I'm very fortunate that it has come thus far. I mean, as far as it has come, and I'm also, it's good to hear that there are other people who are just as frustrated as I am. I can tell you that the problem has continued, and it really has caused a lot of nuisance, and also it's a health. There are health concerns also with having a large flock of birds, just on roofs and backyards and lawns and et cetera. So that's sort of like the background information I can give you. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
And just as a follow-up to what Ed said, the process once we got it from Ed, we had sent it to legal counsel in town. Paul Haverty reviewed it on 2 different occasions with some input that we had received. We had invited in Board of Health and Animal Control and got some input from them on it. So that's how we ended up with the final warrant that we have. Jim, you're muted.
Thank you. Does it substantially track what we're seeing in other towns?
What was that?
Does this substantially track what we're seeing in other towns, such as I know Ed mentioned that Westford has this bylaw in place. I didn't know that. I didn't go look to see if it's similar. Just wondering. Similar to that.
The changes are minor, in my opinion. They're minor. Animal control officer. They had a different, I think, word for that. And I don't have it open in front of me. You're clicking through it. But there was, Paul Haverty had, I want to say, 3 minor changes as far as I'm trying to.
Yeah, I can go back into
a couple small. Yeah, there's just a couple small definitions where, for instance, it didn't say who would be the fining or the enforcement authority, things like that. But we spelt that out in ours.
I see that. I have a question.
Certainly.
I hope I can answer it.
I'm not sure exactly how it would come about, but my question is specifically if we know how many complaints have been had by the animal control officers and how many properties that affect in, say, a year or a month.
I mean, they're not here. I will say that we're dealing with one currently, along with Ed, the one that's out on 129. The flock is really substantial. The birds are dropping on the person's deck, roof, patio, to the point where when they go outside, even when the kids just go outside for a minute, they track it back into the house, which is a huge concern from a Board of Health standpoint. But I would say 2 of the people that reached out to me didn't report anything, like the skunk issue. That was never reported to anybody at Town Hall as an issue. They just watched their neighbor do it and then don't go down that street, from 10 to midnight when they go out for a walk at night, So I don't know how much gets reported. I do know, I think when Animal Control was in, he did say a few times a year he gets a call like this. So it's not an overwhelming, but the problem is there is no enforcement without this type of a bylaw. So there really is nothing the animal control officer can do when he does get a call to enforce any type of rules. So it's not something that I think you're going to see used often or frequently, but it does carry weight and can be enforced. So when we do have a situation like this, it can be brought under control.
That's the information I was looking for. So I was curious if we need 4 more animal control officers to support this.
No, yeah, I don't think so. I think when he came to us, I think he said it was just a few times a year. Like bears, he said that they go into hibernation. We were trying to do this in an earlier warrant, but after talking to him, he said really for the 2 or 3 times a year he gets called, it's not something we should rush. So we slowed it down, made sure Paul Harry had a chance to review it a couple times, and make sure it was right before we brought it to you. And that's why we're coming fall. And my understanding is it wouldn't be implemented until the spring anyway. So there would be time if someone had a secondary thought, but it does allow the animal control officer to actually do something, because right now he visits these houses and he tells them to stop doing it and he leaves. And then within a day or two, we get calls saying they're doing it again.
It's a tool. It's a tool in the tool belt now. Where
Is
one
it
day-
defined? Sorry, is it defined somewhere else in the town, either bylaws or elsewhere? Are we relying on the state definition of what is considered a public safety threat or a nuisance?
That's not one I can answer. That's probably going to be a question for Paul Haverty.
Those just seem like rather somewhat vague terms. So if I have a, and this is an extreme hypothetical, I understand that, but if I have one wild turkey that I'm feeding and he comes every couple of days and I give him food and he leaves, is that a public safety threat? Sounds like we're talking about things that have gotten out of control and are somewhat, beyond a random
first
turkey
of all,
that I feed.
Right. First, one of your neighbors would have to see you, get annoyed by it, and call it in.
Right.
I mean, that's the big one, is that, someone's got to see you do it, and then it's got to get called in as an issue. And that's where I think it's just like, as Jim said, another tool in the tool belt for animal control, because he's only getting 2 or 3 of these calls a year, but he's totally helpless when he gets the call. I don't think you're going to have people calling in one turkey.
There's no current way to enforce him going out there. So he goes out. It's basically what we're saying. He goes out there, looks at it, says, "Don't do it," but there's no incentive for them not to do it. They say, "Okay, sure, I won't do it," and then they just do it again.
One of the interesting statistics I saw as I was reading about this online and doing some research is there are more people hurt in New England in a year by wild turkeys than moose, deer, and bear combined. They're an aggressive bird, particularly in the morning when they're coming out of the trees. They will attack. The hook that's on the back of their claws or their feet is the weapon. And when they come down, I actually did have a neighbor injured off of Rainbow when the turkey came out of the tree in the morning, a pine tree, and landed on his back and cut his neck. So they are fairly aggressive animals, especially when the females are around and it's mating season. The toms do get very, very aggressive and protective.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have one, just so I'm clear. Can you guys hear me? I just want to make sure my mic is on.
Yep.
Just so I'm clear, this does extend to your private property, correct? So like Eric was talking about in his hypothetical, the turkeys are on your property. You cannot feed them on your property. This isn't just about on public grounds, correct?
Correct.
And as I'm reading it, it does not, at this juncture, mean bird feeders. However, at any moment, that bird feeder could be considered a contributing factor to the nuisance, correct?
Well, let me pull up that actual section.
That's just not meant to include.
Yeah, so I'll show you. I'll highlight that section right here. Hold on.
The section after that, right? Yeah, right there. Yeah, it says, however, if the feeder is determined to be the cause of the public safety threat or nuisance. So who makes that decision? Animal control?
The animal control officer may order. So the animal control officer is one that's doing the orders. So that I think is one of the spots where we included. I think in the Westford, it just said if the feeder is determined, the debris must be removed within 48 hours. It didn't say who was enforcing that. So that's one of the areas that I know Paul Haverty he added. The animal control officer is the deciding force here.
Okay. So that there's someone that's in charge of making that determination, as opposed to it being ambiguous as it was in that other bylaw.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you both for being here this evening.
Thank you, and thank you.
Thank
Ed.
you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a good night.
Okay. Moving along in our agenda, we've gone through the final 4 presentations that we needed to review. We have a section of public comment. Do we have anyone who'd like to speak during public comment? Hi, Paul.
Hi, good evening, members of the Finance Committee. I just want to take a moment on the public comment just to speak about the Finance Committee's upcoming recommendations regarding the use of free cash. And my comment will try to be brief. As you know, for the past year that we've been dealing in the planning for the fiscal 21 budget, we've been relying on information as it develops through the entire process. And I guess basically that information continues to develop. We saw that obviously when we were at town meeting in June, and then the state in the end of July, guaranteed the level funding of state aid, as Mr. Vergazio spoke about earlier. And then you may be aware that 2 days ago, Governor Baker on Tuesday filed the supplemental state budget for fiscal year 20, the year that just ended in fiscal year 20. And what he reported was that the state would not have to draw down on any of its cash reserves to close out fiscal year 20. And what he said in that report was that the reason for that was at the end of the day, the state income tax remained strong and the federal COVID relief sort of, helped bridge the day. So they were able to close the fiscal year, which they will in the next month because the state comptroller has to control the books. And then now, obviously, the legislature and the administration are looking towards balancing the FY21 budget. And fortunately, the depth of the financial concerns have not materialized for fiscal 21. At one point, they were talking perhaps a $7 billion deficit at the state budget level, and now they're talking maybe 3, 4, 5, what have you, and they're trying to figure out how to deal with that. Why I take this time to mention that is, I agree with Mr. Vergazio's sentiment. I think we're sort of along the same lines of the thinking. I think where we diverge is, my concern is really leaning heavily now towards fiscal 22. The budget year that will start, next July, that we're already starting the capital planning process for now, and we'll start the operating process. And my concern is that basically what I want to do is I want to take the $4 million in funding from the town, from the free cash and the stabilization fund, and spread it out over the 2 years, as opposed to going all in fiscal year 21. And the reason for that is, I think, again, with the best information that's available as of now, 22 may be a bigger concern than certainly 20 was, and what 21 appears to be at this point in time. Because in 22, which again would start next July and go through June 30th of 22, there are a lot of things that will happen, some in the town and some that will happen in the economy, and some that we just don't know what will happen. One of the concerns in the town in terms of the budget going forward is we expect our budget will grow in fiscal 22. And the reasons for that have been explained in previous meetings, and I'll highlight them real quickly. One is we know we have contractual obligations for salary compensation schedules and cost of living adjustments, because most of the town's collective bargaining agreements go out through 22, and that's 2% plus steps. Also, we heard from John Souza at the tri-board meeting that we know we're going to get an impact from Middlesex retirement in 22. And we also know that our trash contract is going to impact us in 22. And again, it's just the normal cost of operations as we go into 22. And so my concern is that we may not generate as much free cash in 21 next July. And why do I feel that way is, well, we've already made the reductions. We cut the snow and ice budget to $1 million by $500,000. And we reduced our funding to our OPEB liability, unfunded liability, by $500,000. And we know the budgets are tighter. And so my concern is what's taking place is, normally if we applied no stabilization fund and no free cash, the average single family tax bill would probably go up about $210. That's the old metric of $70 per $1 million of taxes, because our levy is around $100 million. So what's going to happen is in 21, the year that we're in now, the next 2 quarter bills are going to go down because the fact that they were higher the first 2 quarters, and then the tax rate will get set, and we're sort of level funding it, or perhaps even a reduction in the levy. But the concern is when you get to 22, if these cost considerations come in and we do get a loss of state aid because perhaps the federal relief, and now this is getting speculative, but history has shown us that as the crisis tends to wane, the relief wanes with it, and then government tends to lag in the recovery. And so the concern would be that in 22, if we're back to full levy, instead of having a gradual increase in property tax, you would have a level funded in 21, or perhaps a decrease if they went all in with the stabilization fund. And then in 22, your tax increase, if we're at full levy, again, without even touching in terms of level service, assuming level service, you could be looking at a $400 to $500 tax increase in 22 to fund the ongoing operations. And so again, that concerns me, because now you're having a tax impact that's quite significant. And what happens is, and we sort of saw this a couple of years ago when the tax rate was split, and then it should have shifted the other way. People sort of only remember where they're moving from in the immediate previous fiscal year. So my concern is that we may be causing a concern in 22 where we might be better off doing a levelized and stable approach to the use of the reserves over a 2-year period, as opposed to going all in 1 year and then having a spike in 22. So I'll end my comments there, but it's just, I just want to explain the current information, and again, the shift now towards concerns towards 22, when those really weren't as evident as we were, when we were a few months ago. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Any other public comments? Seeing none and none in the chat, we're going to proceed with the review, discuss, and vote on 2020 Fall Town Meeting warrant article recommendations. So, Kath, are you up for reading the motions? I'll present them all. Well, you're muted. Hold on.
I am.
All right. So let me just share my screen again. I'll at least go through the slides for you, so you don't have to go shuffling through.
Thank you.
All right. So Article 1 is a report of town officers and committees. We make no vote on that. Oops. Consent agenda items are 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, but typically we will vote individually on these, and then I will list the items that we voted and how we voted on them. So Article 2.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept Article 2, moving that the town transfer $50,000 from the sale of graves and lots account to the Cemetery Improvement and Development Fund.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. I am going to do roll call on these just to make sure we hear everybody. So I'll take a vote. Kathy?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Vicky?
Yes.
Amina?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Anita? I can't hear you. Is that a yes?
Yes.
All right, and I'll vote yes. That's 7-0. Article, it's being slow on me. Give me a second. Article 3.
Make a motion that we accept Article 3, the town appropriate $10,696.90 that was received by the town from the Commonwealth Transportation Infrastructure Fund to fund the installation of solar-powered flashing LED stop signs and other traffic safety improvements at the intersection of Graniteville Road and School Street.
Do a second?
Second.
Discussion? I think that's a good location for them to target based upon recent events. All right, roll call vote. Kathy?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Vicky?
Yes.
Amina?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Anita?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. That's 7-0. In favor. Moving to Article 4.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept Article 4, moving that the town transfer $335,050 from free cash to the Sewer Construction Stabilization Fund.
Second.
I have a motion to second. Discussion? None needed.
Straightforward. Nope.
Yeah. All right, roll call vote. Kathy?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Vicky?
Yes.
Amina?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Anita?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. That's 7-0, Pam. Thank you. Article 5.
I make a motion that we accept Article 5, moving that the town transfer $618,750 that has been received by the town under the town's inclusionary housing zoning bylaw to the Affordable Housing Stabilization Fund.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion?
Does anyone remember, apologies because I don't, I know we're moving in the 618 or 619. What's the balance in this fund? Just a curiosity question more than anything.
This is the first appropriation into the fund. The balance is 0.
Well, that's an easy answer, Paul. Thank you. No math needed.
Here we go. Now, don't ask that same question next year, though. All right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Kathy?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Vicky?
Yes.
Mina?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Anita?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. That's 7-0. Pam? In favor. Article 6. There is no action. Paul, we don't anticipate any action prior to town meeting?
No.
Okay, just checking. Hope springs eternal. Article 7. There's no action. Article 8.
Okay. I will make a motion that we accept Article 8 as presented to purchase the small lot on Parkle Road, parcel 102-410-4 for the sum of $16,200
From free cash?
from free cash to include, which could be including related legal and other costs incidental and related thereto, and further authorization of the select board and town manager to make all actions necessary to acquire said parcels.
Second.
A motion is second. Any discussion?
I'd just like to say, I think that is great, and it's going to be really a wonderful thing for a very small amount of money to be able to combine those two lots. And I really applaud the town's efforts to maintain as much open space as possible.
Okay. Yeah, it adds a lot of frontage there, which is that's a nice little sliver of land right along the road. I always laugh when we find those things. But division and subdivision and takings and everything eventually end up with something like that. So All right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Kathy,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Vicky,
Yes.
Amina,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Anita.
Yes.
I'll vote yes. It's so no. Pam, in favor for Article. All right, it bounced back on me here. Article 8. Article 9.
I make a motion that we accept Article 9, moving that the town borrow $3,400,000 pursuant to Massachusetts general laws, Chapter 44, Section 7 or 8, or any other enabling authority for the renovation and expansion of the fire department station located at 35 Princeton Street, identified as Lot 1 on Assessor's Map 13, Block 44, including related survey, legal, and other costs incidental and related thereto.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
I just quickly, I think that the chief and Gary and all those involved in this put together a pretty solid presentation and pitch and good options. And driving by this regularly from the outside, it looks like an old squat brick building. The pictures from the inside make it look even older. So I think it's a well-deserved upgrade that is deserved.
It's also a safety concern, really, that they're also addressing with this. And I think I'm happy to hear that they're using with the new modular construction. And whenever anyone hears modular, they get a little concerned because they think, oh, well, it's, this temporary building. But as Gary Ketty mentioned back in our presentation 2 weeks ago, he expects this to have a life of at least 40 years, I believe he stated. So I don't think we have that concern, and it also provides an improvement both visually, but also for safety purposes. It's time. It's the oldest station, and it services a good portion of town.
Well, additionally, modulars aren't, what they used to be, and if you just have to look at the elementary schools to see that, it's more like prefab than what we used to say modulars were. They're just built ahead of time and then assembled on site. But if anybody, I would say if any town meeting rep has a concern, they should look at the pictures of the elementary schools, because those are buildings. You can't tell. You walk through them, it just looks like an addition.
Mm-hmm. As this will look.
Well, I think anytime you can enhance your facilities for 40 years and improve people's working conditions for relatively little money, it's a excellent opportunity for Chelmsford.
Absolutely. We need to take care of those who are taking care of us.
All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Roll call vote. Kathy?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Vicky?
Yes.
Amina?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Anita?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. That's 7-0 in favor. Pam? All right. And just so you know, I'm just going around in a circle when I'm calling your names. That's how you're showing up on my screen right now.
It's working well.
All right. Article 10.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept Article 10. I move that the town appropriate $2,175,687 for the following capital projects. DPW road improvements, $400,000, DPW sidewalk, $350,000, fire department turnout gear, $115,000, Parker School kitchen renovation, $373,000, McCarthy School auditorium renovation, $740,000.
Second.
Do I need to read the rest of it?
Yeah, Part C is important.
Okay.
All right.
I'll read the whole thing. That to meet this appropriation, the town authorized the treasurer within the approval of the Board of Selectmen to borrow $1,978,000 under Chapter 44 of the general laws or any other enabling authority, that any premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any premium applied to the payment of the cost of issuance of such bonds or notes be applied to the payment or costs approved by this vote in accordance with Chapter 44, Section 20 of the general laws, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount, authorize the Board of Selectmen to contract for and expend any federal or state aid available for the project, and authorize the town manager to take any other action necessary or convenient to carry out these projects. And C, raise and appropriate $396,337 to fund the fiscal year 2021 debt service payment for these capital projects.
Eric's job is so much easier. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
We normally approve debt service as part of this? Or is what's unique about this if that's not the case?
Well, normally we wouldn't be doing a capital budget for fiscal year at fall town meeting. We're bringing in things that were not funded under the capital plan for this year in the spring due to concerns related to the budget for COVID and other uncertainties that were there at the time. And so these capital projects, as you'll see up on the next slide, have fall capital requests of Public Works amount of $750, Fire Department $115, and school facilities $1,113,000. Public Works is the sidewalk construction road improvements, the firefighter turnout gear for public safety, and the school facilities, the Parker Middle School upgrade for the kitchen, and McCarthy Middle School auditorium renovation. So that brings the fall town meeting. I believe that brings us back to the original amount we were going to borrow and then have debt service for from Springtown meeting in the fiscal year 21 budget. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yeah, we reduced the debt service line at the Springtown meeting to correspond with the capital plan that was voted at Springtown meeting.
Yeah. And so because we will have a payment that'll be due, we need to have that debt service come back in order to cover the additional capital projects that are being added back in, I guess, that for lack of a better way to describe it.
So that $1,978,000 will be borrowed and executed in time that we're going to incur the 396 on it in the rest of fiscal year 21?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And the funding, just to clarify, the funding source that's earmarked for that, Paul?
That's raise and appropriates the tax levy.
Thank you. All right. Any further discussion? Any other questions?
I'll just add that I think we're fortunate that the things worked out with some of the, I think, unexpected state results that allowed us to put this back in. I think most of these are very, very well timed, especially for the school things that we can do with the school not being in use. We get some of this done now.
Yeah, I think to clarify, because I know some people I've heard some consternation or concern over the school projects for the school facilities, the Parker Middle School and the middle school and the middle school for the auditorium. And I first of all echo your sentiment, Eric, that to have these done while we have a limited amount of people in the building, I think it helps significantly to get those taken care of during this time, because that's when you want to get stuff like that done. That you look at the senior center and the renovation of that kitchen and the work's being done there. It can be done when it's not being used. It's going to make the whole process go smoother. Also, I know that we have, and I guess we'll probably be submitting again this year, a plan to build a new school, although that has not been accepted as of yet. And there's no guarantee it will be in any time in the near future. But any timeline that we're looking at is far in the future, and these upgrades will be used no matter what the plans are for these buildings for many years to come. All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Kathy?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Vicky?
Yes.
Amina?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Anita?
Yes.
And I will vote yes as well. That's 7-0, Pam. Okay, Article 11.
Okay, I make a motion that we accept Article 12 submitted by citizen petition Paul Regazio. I move that the town transfer from free cash $1 million to reduce the fiscal year 2021 property tax levy.
I second.
Discussion.
Okay, I really appreciate Mr. Regazzi's efforts to help the taxpayers in Chelmsford who may be struggling with the real estate taxes. However, I feel that given the current circumstance, number one, given the current circumstances, the money is best served in the stabilization fund so we can smooth out the increases of taxes and have money available for the town to get us through what could be precarious times ahead. And I think the problem was saying to somebody, I'm going to reduce my taxes. If I get a bill in year one and my bill is $50, and someone tells me they're going to reduce my taxes by taking $1 million out of the stabilization account, then I expect my bill to go down to $45. I don't expect my bill that last year was $50, being told I'm going to be reduced my bill, and this year it really is $55 because of the value of my home has gone up. So people, you know, unless you give them that $10 or $15 in cash, they're not going to be feeling that their taxes have been reduced, because you want to go from this watermark down to that watermark. And this methodology doesn't effectively make that happen. So the whole conversation he was having about putting money back into the economy, no, that doesn't really fly, because you're not getting any cash to put back in the economy. But I very much appreciate his effort. I very much appreciate his sentiment that taxes are high. But what I would recommend, if people cannot truly feel that they don't have the financial ability to pay their real estate taxes, that they avail themselves of some programs that the town has to either postpone their defer their real estate taxes until the home is sold, or senior credits, or people who have actual financial difficulties. So I would suggest that if you actually have issues about being able to pay your tax bill, that you seek out alternative methods available to you. That's all.
So I'm going to vote against this. And again, while I appreciate, yes, the free cash flow going back, I was looking through what we cut out of this year's budget, and two big items that concern me are the snow and ice removal. We took $500,000 out of this year's operating budget. And then we also took out public safety overtime, as well as $475,000. And then we took out another $500,000 for OPED, funding of the OPED. So while, again, I appreciate it, we did cut back, and we don't know how the snow is going to be. We don't know what lies ahead. I think we should keep this in free cash. I also have concerns with the school as this pandemic continues to go forward, whether there's going to be any additional costs from the school that may come out that we have not anticipated yet. I mean, I'm grateful that they were able to get the computers all out to all the students, but you know, this is not over yet. And I think it's premature to start doing removing of the free cash. So I will be voting against it.
So I'm in agreement with both Kathy and Anita. I think that especially given, you know, echoing Paul's sentiments from earlier, that we don't know what next fiscal year is going to look like, but we do know that there are going to be many challenges. We don't, you know, the X factor is this virus and the pandemic, and how is it going to affect us next fiscal year? I think taking $1 million out of free cash is not the fiscally responsible thing to do. I understand why he put forward the petition, and I appreciate that we do have some citizens in town who struggle with their real estate tax bill. But like Kathy said, there are, you know, many other avenues open to them if they sought them out. I think that it's not like people are getting thousands of dollars off their real estate tax by us doing this. But at the same time, by doing it, I think we could potentially be putting the town in a bit of a pickle down the road. So I'm going to be voting against it as well.
I would agree with all that. The longer term view to me is we had to pull $2 million out of the fund for fiscal year 21. We're fortunate that we actually had, you know, rather, I feel a good size amount of free cash coming out of 20. So I would rather replenish that kind of along Paul's line of, you know, this isn't going to be over in the next 3 or 6 months. And if that rule of thumb is correct, that I know it's a rule of thumb that $1 million is $70 off an average family home, but $6 a month. I'm not sure that $6 a month is going to make or break someone's you know, financial situation. So I would, this could probably be a copy and paste response for all 4 of these articles we're going to be talking about. But I did have one question that's kind of related to this, and Paul, if you don't mind me asking, when I think at the tri-board, one of the slides indicated that we're like 2.9 million under the levy is what we're taxing. The tax levy is 2.9 million under the limit this year, which then I'm thinking that if that's good, one could argue that's good or bad, but I'll say that that's good. So next year when the levy goes up, that gap, all else being equal, would be, you know, up to 2.5% more. So we're talking 5 to 6 million under. So we could, in theory, increase spending by that much looking forward next year?
Well, no, you couldn't, because remember, your spending is still 2 million more. What you're doing is you're paying from your savings account $2 million less. So yes, we have that excess levy capacity because of the state aid. And then if you get the 2% growth next year, you'd have roughly that $4 to $5 million. But again, that's all dependent upon what next year's state aid is going to be. So that's what I'm saying. It's not one for one. It really depends on the other levers that are in the financing sources beyond the property tax.
Okay, thank you.
I agree with everything that's been said, obviously. And I think Paul made a very rational argument about, not argument, but projection about what could possibly be the scenario for the following year. I think we don't know what the future is going to hold for sure. And this is the one place where you want to be as strong as you can possibly be, especially with not knowing the future and looking to keep your borrowing costs as low as possible. So I think I also will vote against this, although I do think it's a good idea that it go to town meeting and that everybody in town meeting get to vote on what we should do with the stabilization fund on matters like this.
And I concur with what was said. There isn't much more to say. I was concerned originally with the OPEB and the tight budgets with the pandemic. So I will also be voting no.
Yeah, so I think it's no shock that we're all in agreement on this one. It goes in line with how we voted in the past, and I think it especially is important in this year and the upcoming couple of years. Paul stole a little of my thunder. We're looking at fiscal 20 that closed with only one off quarter, and we know we have fiscal year 21 reductions with school, snow and ice. That is a concerning one. Farmers Almanac says we're going to have a tough winter, and hopefully maybe that's not the case, but they're not wrong very often. We're looking at public safety reductions and also OPEB, and I've always been a strong proponent of funding OPEB because it's something that our future generations are stuck footing the bill for, and I think holding off funding on that was necessary in this budget. But is certainly a concern because it's not an obligation that's going to go away. We've seen no movement in the legislature to adjust or reduce that obligation. It's there, it's real. Given our already known demands that are coming in the future, such as retirement requirements, the trash contract, our collective bargaining agreements and our 2% cost of living increases that are already built in, that we already know are going to be there, to take away more funding, I think would be kind of foolish, quite frankly. Especially in a year where, again, we're also going to have already a reduction in the amount of increase for property taxes because we were under the levy limit, because we got more state funding than we thought we would. So we've already taken from stabilizations. We have reduced the amount that's in stabilization. To give some of that back would be prudent, especially because if you look at our capital plan coming out in the next few years, and I know that the capital planning committee is going to be meeting for fiscal year 22 soon. Just while we're talking about that, Amina, do you want to serve in that capacity again?
Yeah, that'd be fine. Be my pleasure.
Okay.
Sorry, it's hard to find the mute button on here. Every time I push it, it doesn't work. All
right. So Amina will be our representative on the capital planning committee for fiscal year 22. One of the things that when our audit comes around every year that they talk about is the bond rating, and bond rating is tied to cash reserves strongly. And if we're taking out from cash reserves in an uncertain time and then not replenishing cash reserves when we have the opportunity, it can possibly affect our bond rating. And I wouldn't want that to happen, given the the strong bond market and the increased capital needs that we're going to see over the next decade. So with all that said, I think I'm sorry for regurgitating a lot of what people have already put in place, but I think I am definitely voting against this one. All right. Any other further discussion? All right.
Well, just to interject a little levity into it. I won't be going to Florida this year, so I want to make sure that if we need more money for plowing and salting the roads, we can get it. So,
now you want them to have it.
I want to make sure it's there if we need it.
That's true. It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Any further discussion? All right. I'm not seeing any. Roll call vote. Kathy?
No.
Eric?
No.
Vicky?
No.
Amina?
No.
David?
No.
Anita?
No.
And I'll vote no as well. That is 7-0 against, Pam, for Article 12. I'm sorry, for Article 11. Article 12?
I'll make a motion that we accept Article 12, free cash to reduce the tax levy. He didn't put in an amount here, though. I don't have an amount for this.
An amount to be determined.
Okay, an amount. I move that the town transfer from free cash an amount to be determined to reduce the fiscal year 2021 property tax levy.
I second.
The motion is second. Discussion. I think this kind of ties in with what we said before.
Yeah.
Certainly, all options are.
Yeah, ditto.
Yeah, all options are available, and that's why it's presented this way. It's both free cash and also stabilization fund coming up later. So if the town meeting so chooses to give it an amount, to use an amount less than the amount that's earmarked, it's available through this article. But I do believe it's more prudent to return that to the free cash to the stabilization fund. Any further discussion?
No, and can I say one thing? And if there was like I've lived in this town for 50 years. I've owned my house for 25 years. OPED was enacted in 2009. So I've lived here, so that was 13 years, where I have reaped the benefits of this town and have not contributed to that liability. So if there is extra money, I personally feel that that money should be going to fund that liability. So if there's any extra cash, I would like to, leave it for funding the liability so that it's less of a tax burden for my children.
Well spoken, Anita.
Or me. Just saying. Not to age myself. Or you. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, roll call vote. Kathy?
No.
Eric?
No.
Vicky?
No.
Amina?
No.
David?
No.
Anita?
No.
And I will vote no as well, 7-0 against. Article 13.
Make a motion that we accept Article number 13 submitted by the town manager. I move that the town transfer from free cash $1,370,370,370 to the general stabilization fund.
All right, second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? This would be the other location to which the funds we just discussed would go. If it's not voted in here, it would remain in free cash. So I think this is where we send it. I'm fully happy to recommend this, given that we've taken $2 million out of the general stabilization, taken $2 million out of the general stabilization fund for fiscal year 21, to put that back in and to keep that reserve up, because again, the budget went up, it goes up for cost, just alone for cost of living increases in contract requirements, it goes up. So if we took 2 million out and it went up again, the percentage went down, and we still fall in that percentage of the goal of 5 to 7.5%, or targeting 7.5% of the operating budget. I think we need to hold true and follow that form. Any other comments or questions or discussion? Hearing none. Roll call vote. Kathy?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Vicky?
Yes.
Amina?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Anita?
Yes.
I'll vote yes as well, 7-0 in favor. Article 14.
Article 14, to make a motion that we accept Article 14 submitted by citizen petition Paul Regazio. I move that the town transfer from the general stabilization fund $1 million to reduce the fiscal year 2021 property tax levy.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All right, I hit mute. I had one job and I failed.
It's all right, I got your back.
Thanks, Dave.
We've got a motion in a second. Okay, you fail me, Redbeard. Motion in a second. Any discussion?
I think this falls in line with the other two that we were discussing.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I agree.
Agreed.
Where we just funded the stabilization fund, why now take it back out?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Kathy?
No.
Eric?
Nope.
Vicky?
No.
Amina?
No.
David?
No.
Anita?
No.
I'll vote no as well, 7-0 against. Article 15.
I make a motion that we accept Article 15 submitted by citizen petition Paul Regazio. I move that the town transfer from the general stabilization fund an amount to be determined at a later time to reduce the fiscal year 2021 property tax levy.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
My same principles.
Yeah. I mean, again, it provides for all four options. If we don't do with free cash, I'm not sure why we would do it here. But I guess it's the way the warrant falls. You know, we've put money into if it falls the way we've recommended. We voted no on the first two, so then the free cash goes into stabilization because we voted yes on that. We voted no on the million, so it'd be if someone wants to say, well, then I still want to take out an X amount of money instead of doing it prior as a free cash distribution. I guess another bite at the apple in a different way. Yeah, I follow the same thought process in this, and then we'll leave it to town meeting to vote as they so choose. But I would recommend no. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Kathy?
Yes, I mean, no. I mean, yes, to me saying no.
So just to be clear, your vote is
So
no.
confused.
My vote is no.
Thank you. Eric?
No.
Vicky?
No.
Amina?
No.
David?
No.
Anita?
No.
I'll vote no, 7-0 against. Article 16.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we accept Article 16 submitted by the planning board, moving that the town amend the town code, chapter 195 zoning bylaw by adopting a new zoning bylaw, historical preservation and reuse as follows. 195-148, purpose and intent. The purpose of this bylaw is to encourage the preservation of buildings, structures, sites, settings of historic significance by allowing such buildings or features to remain in place rather than be demolished or otherwise compromised. The continuing presence of historic properties in the town of Chelmsford immeasurably enhances the quality of our lives. They help to establish our sense of place and to define the very character of our community. This bylaw gives the planning board the authority to issue a special permit for the creation of new lots or for the use of existing lots for purposes of preservation of historic structures or buildings. The special permit granting authority shall be the planning board.
And I will allow you to say the rest of the bylaw as written.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And the rest of the as written.
Second.
We have a motion is second. Discussion?
I'm going to be voting against this for a couple of reasons. The first has to do with the fact that there's not enough, I think reducing the setbacks can adversely affect a neighborhood, let alone putting, building more house, cramming more houses in. I appreciate that we want to preserve these historical homes. I think if someone's going to buy a historical home and preserve it, they're going to invest the money. I'm concerned, a situation came up about a year ago that a developer wanted to buy a house. They had to get a variance and they were going to split the lot. And the number one concern that came out was how close it was going to be to the property line. and that concerns me because as a like you bought your house, you bought you bought it in the neighborhood, you're spending your money, you're paying your taxes, and not if someone wants to split the lot, then they can go and get a variance to do so, and that provides you as a homeowner a mechanism to work with the builder. But if we put this bylaw in place, it's an automatic and doesn't give a voice to those who've lived in the neighborhood, who've kept up their home, right? They don't have any power to work with, the builder has no obligation to work with them because it's just, bang, here you go. I also looked at the properties. I've, driven around some of the homes. Like, I don't see any that are like really in bad condition. They all look nice. I mean, people are taking care of them. And I think one of the properties I thought was interesting that it was on the list because it really doesn't have any architectural, like anything exciting on the outside that you would, like, I was just surprised it was on the list. I'm like, really, this is that old? And maybe because it's been built upon multiple times that there wasn't anything interesting to keep that way. So I don't know. I'm going to be voting against this, let alone the fact that we don't have the sewer capacity to support any more development in this town.
Any other discussion?
Well,
Go ahead.
that's sorry, Vicky. To me, it's a little bit like Groundhog Day. I feel like we've been talking about variations of this for a while, and I guess I'm a little conflicted because on one hand it's like, well, from what they listed out, the current number of houses that are historically significant that would have qualified for this, it's in that 30 to 40 range. So I'm like, well, 30 houses, doesn't seem like that big of a deal. And to Anita's sewer point, it's 30 single family homes. I don't think that's what's going to be pushes us over the limit. But the flip side of that is it's 30 lots. So like, why are we going to do all of this effort for something that is so insignificant in the grand scheme of, I think 19,000 single family homes was quoted in the meeting. But at the same time, I guess to me a 20,000 square foot lot, having lived for several years in Boston, that's a huge plot of land. Doesn't really feel that way in Chelmsford. But I don't know, to the question of the neighbors don't have a say, I understand and would agree with that as far as this is written, but anything beyond what's already allowed today, they got to go before the ZBA. So, whether it's setbacks or any of that stuff, if they're going to do something that's outside of what's allowed today on a regular lot, there's still a process to request it and for a neighbor to fight it. So I think I'm leaning more on such a small number of lots that are in play to probably be more coming down on the side of voting yes for
I myself really value the historical homes. I think that they did a lot of homework. I was torn. So development, Anita, you have some great points. Eric, you have some good points. Anything pre-1801, if we lose one more of those, in my opinion, it's a loss to me. I love our town and I love it for those reasons. And I really do trust the ZB. And I feel as if the zoning board has given this a lot of thought and they've worked together. It seems very cohesively since last year. I'm going to be a yes. I'm excited about the fact that they're trying to preserve these and there is a minimal amount of homes that actually qualify. So that's where I stand.
One thing I just thought of to add that I was going to try to ask Nancy before she had to run out, and I'm less qualified than anyone to give what I think I recall from last year on the amendment about the ZBA and cutting the variance, the setback in half. We kind of talked about this earlier, but I believe that was applicable to it's the zoning rules that were in place at the time the home was built. Well, if they subdivide their lot and build a new home, that would be today's rules. So like the existing house can't move; it's already there. So I didn't see where we were worried about being able to cut or reduce the setback because of what happened last year, because these are going to be new homes built now. So there are no prior, bylaws or rules to follow. It's today's standards.
But I thought that it also allowed you, like, for instance, if you were building an addition and the zoning bylaw was even, when it was built, say it was 25 feet back. And if you were within a certain percentage, you didn't, like, if it wasn't like, if you were only using, I don't know, 10% or 15%, whatever what it was, that you did not have to go through a zoning board of appeals. And the only reason why I know that is because I happened to be at a zoning board of appeal for some other reason. There was this very thing happened and a neighbor was complaining about it. And they had to say, well, no, this is the new zoning. This is allowed. It can go, this addition can go that close to your house. So that's my, and again, and what concerns me is that a lot of, especially like I'm from East Chelmsford, and East Chelmsford is cut up. It's a very old part of Chelmsford. Our setbacks are not that far. So when you have another house built and it's only 12.5 feet from your house, that can be very disturbing to a neighbor, to someone. And we have a process to go through that if that's to happen, and at least it doesn't allow them to necessarily fight, but work with them. Because that was their issue was, and by the way, this developer had thought that the last time it went through, last town meeting, that we had approved that zoning, and that's why they were building all of this, and didn't realize it had to go through the zoning board of appeals. But this, this person was very distressed about how close it would be to their home. And, I think that's what the zoning board of appeals is there for people to work together to, and these are very reasonable people. They're like, why can't you build it like a little bit further? Or why can't you make it a little bit smaller? Or, and I think taking that right away from the people who live in this town, who've been living in this town and paying these taxes. I appreciate older homes, in fact, I would love to purchase an older home and renovate it, but I don't want it on 20,000 square feet. Like, give me 1.5 acres and then I'll really make it beautiful, right? Like, if you really want to look at values of homes, I don't know, it's hard enough to find something older with a lot of land here.
It's true.
So,
And so
Eric,
why would I invest money if it's, I don't know.
So Eric, to your point, I think your interpretation is accurate, where the additional lot would be subject to, because it's building a new building, subject to the current zoning bylaws as opposed to the previous zoning bylaws. So the application of the zoning bylaws passed back in last year, I believe, and again, we can get clarification on the town meeting floor from Paul Haverty. But my inkling is that your interpretation is correct, where the new lot would be subject to the new setback requirements as opposed to the previous setback requirements of the historical property and its current setbacks as of the date in which it was constructed. So I think that at least addresses that portion of it. And currently, so what could currently happen, though, I think the reason why this is being put forward, Anita, and I do understand your concerns, but through the zoning board of appeals, someone could come in, tear down a historic property, and then subdivide, and then appeal to subdivide and build 2 properties. So what this is doing is saying, okay, we'll let you build the second property, but you have to put this restriction on record for this property, and this property will not be changed. So it preserves the one portion of the property, gives the second lot as an incentive, so that you're not automatically having to go to the zoning board of appeals. Instead, it's incentive laden to keep the initial property the way it is, because again, it'll be subject to a historical preservation restriction that's on record that goes with the property. It allows the lot, again, subject to zoning board of appeals and zoning bylaws, that second lot will be allowed, but then they'll have to conform to today's restrictions for that second lot. So there's nothing, there's nothing preventing a developer from coming in and then seeking a variance from the Board of Appeals to tear down the first house and then subdivide and build the way they want to. This at least would be preserving a portion of it. So I understand the concern about the second lot, but I don't think it's alleviated by simply not supporting this article. It's just a different process, and it, by the way, doesn't preserve the initial house.
Right, but you're also making an assumption, because I suggest looking through some of these houses, because like I said, I know one of them in particular. You're making an assumption, right, that yeah, someone can buy and tear it down. I get that, and still build the two houses, but at least, right, someone can do that anyways. And we hope that they don't. Some of these houses are, extremely beautiful. Some of them aren't. Some are not. There's one property on this list that I was like, ooh, like that's okay. That one goes away.
The eye of the beholder.
Right, and I get that, right? And again, I just think the town's way too crowded as it is, and people are angry about how overcrowded it is and overbuilding. And as much as I, don't like change, sometimes maybe if that's the case and that's how people want to go, then you let them. I mean, again, it's up to me. We wouldn't have allowed all the historical buildings in the center of town, multifamily, right? There's some of them in town that, across by the library, that's absolutely gorgeous. That was a single family.
Well, then you're on the wrong committee.
Yeah. I mean, I would have, it's a shame that they were converted. But, regardless, I think you just need to let it be. And again, I've had personal experience with it through folks in East Chelmsford that had to go through this. And it opened my eyes to what could possibly happen and how people could, builders could take advantage of it. So I am after that experience, I'm even more so against this than I was before.
I think we have to agree to disagree.
Fair enough.
I find some of the zoning changes, I feel like you really have to pay attention to all the nuances. And it always does seem like something comes up that we didn't quite think of, or, a builder's using it this way or whatever. But I think they gave a very good presentation. Better than the ones I remember in the past, but that could be just because I saw this today. Like the thing that you just saw is always the best. But I thought they gave a very good presentation. They rolled it back from 1938 to 1800, so they're severely limiting the homes that this would be applicable to. So I've been back and forth, but I believe I'm going to vote yes, because it's a limited number of properties, and that's why, because it's just so few properties. I'm going to vote yes.
Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. Roll call vote. Kathy?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Vicky?
Yes.
Amina?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Anita?
No.
I'll vote yes. 6-1 in favor. All right. Hold on 1 second. Article 17. Hold on, give me a sec. I gotta get through the, there we go.
Okay, I make a motion that we accept Articles 17, wildlife feeding, submitted by the Select Board. I move that the town amend the Town Code, Chapter 11, Animals, by adding a new article, Article 2, wildlife feeding, in sections 11 through 30 through 1133 as follows. Article 2, wildlife feeding, 1130 definitions, as used in this and subsequent sections. Wildlife shall mean any undomesticated and unrestrained animal or fowl, including but not limited to bears, coyotes, deers, foxes, raccoons, skunks, turkeys, and any other animals or fowl causing public safety threats or nuisance.
Yeah, I will, and the rest of the article as written and presented.
Oh, yes, the rest of the article is written and presented. I thought I was done.
Oh, no.
You got a long way to go. I second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I think it's a good idea. I mean, the turkeys in my neighborhood are unbelievable, and they'll get in the street. You can't even, they won't move, and you got your car right there. I mean, you have to stop. They're the traffic cop. And
You don't have to stop.
well, you don't. But
Yes, you do.
I'm sure there'd be some sort of penalty for me if I did that. But so the turkeys are really out of control. And in fact, one morning my husband opened up the front door and there was a turkey, you know, literally 5 inches from him on our top step. So I mean, I'm yes on this.
I guess my concern is, you know, is this really that big of a problem? I mean, the turkeys aren't here because people are feeding them. People aren't feeding turkeys. There's a whole, I don't know what you call a group of turkeys, gaggle. There's a whole group of turkeys in the parking lot at my work in Woburn, and there's no houses around there. It's all industrial, and I guarantee you no one's feeding those turkeys, but they hang out in the parking lot pecking at really shiny cars because they see their reflection. But so I guess my thing is I get it. Turkeys can, you know, be aggressive. But are people actually feeding the turkeys?
According to the presentation and the initial person that brought this forward, the select board, yes, there are people.
But like, what do they say? 2 or 3 people a year?
But I think the impetus behind this is the problem is if they are doing that and the animal control officer goes out to look at it and tell them no, there's really no teeth for the tiger. They can tell them not to do it, but there's no incentive for the person not to do it. And so, yes, it may not affect a whole bunch of people, and maybe people not reporting the concerns that they have over it. I think the skunk one is a little bit of an issue, quite frankly, as well.
People are feeding skunks?
Yes. Did you not hear the presentation?
Yeah. No, I know, but I still don't. It just blows my mind that people are feeding skunks.
I mean, my aunt, God rest her soul, used to feed squirrels peanuts.
I like squirrels.
That's allowed.
I mean,
they're kind of cute. But they also don't make you stink if you get near them.
No, but she was feeding them peanuts, and I mean, and we're talking a lot of peanuts, and the squirrels would take it and then, you know, open them up in someone else's yard, right? Like, I mean, you know, I love my aunt to death, but you know, she was a little obsessive about these squirrels. So I can see, like, I think this is a great little mechanism. Yeah. So, you know, if it's happening, you got a little bit, you know, someone who's a little eccentric who likes the squirrels. Let's leave the turkeys out of it. And they're going a little crazy. You know, this might just say, hey, you know, maybe a little less. Because I think if you're the property owner and this is, you know, whether it's skunks or squirrels or whatever making a mess, it's at least something you can do, because otherwise you feel helpless.
This explicitly allows squirrel feeding, just so we're clear. This does not ban squirrel feeding.
Well, if it's a nuisance, it wouldn't. But
well, it should. But
well, hold on. Let's go back to the actual definition here.
So there's a section that says that
it does the same squirrel feeders.
Where it says it excludes bird feeders, it said excludes squirrel feeders.
Yes.
It's the feeders versus the nuisance, right? So they're saying that if there's a nuisance, you can report it and then they can do something about it.
Yeah.
My concern with that wording, though, is subjective, right? It leaves it up to the person calling. It's a nuisance to them. You know,
No. The subjectiveness lies within the Chelmsford Animal Control Officer's discretion. That's why Paul added it in, because it is ambiguous in other town bylaws that were presented. So this adding in that if a feeder is determined to be the cause of the public or nuisance, the Chelmsford Animal Control Officer may order the feeders and said seed debris to be removed within 48 hours. So the Animal Control Officer is the one deeming it to be a public safety threat or nuisance. It's not the neighbor that's saying, hey, I don't like that bird feeder, get out of there. If it's not a nuisance, as the reporting officer is there to determine, then it won't be removed. And
but to me, it's still, yes, it's subjective. Okay, so it's subjective to the animal control officer, but to me, it's also, I don't know, it's still a little vague. How does he determine if the feeder is the cause. I mean, realistically, I don't know. I really have a problem with us telling people what they can and can't do on their private property. I have a big problem with, with regulations like this. So as I'm reading through it, I'm just finding that it's not terribly specific in some areas, whereas in other areas, I think it's a little overly specific.
So Jim, can they move this feeder, whatever, wherever they're feeding this? Say they're feeding their turkeys in the back lot, right? And the neighbor in the back end has an issue. Does that mean that they would get fined if they started feeding in the front? I'm all in favor of this. I don't want my neighbors doing it. Mine are lovely. I'm so lucky, but not everybody's so lucky. And I can't imagine 5 skunks near my car when I go out in the morning. I would have a heart attack.
I mean,
I don't know. That's where do you frame this is my question, I guess, for the fines.
I don't think it specifically states where the feeder has to be. It just has to be determined to be a public safety threat or nuisance.
Okay.
And I think this kind of also flows into the whole rat issue we had.
Yeah.
So I think that's where that public safety threat or nuisance is coming in. And in that instance, they determined that there was a concern based upon someone coming out and looking and determining. And so I really don't have a problem with this. They can still tell people no now. It's just adding the ability to have a written warning and a fine if they're not complying. And the fact that it's private property, yes, it's private property, but what you do on your private property should not affect others' private property and their use of it. So,
well, I mean, I have no problem with the whole section that talks about like turkeys, like the actual wildlife. I guess my biggest problem is that section about where the bird feeders can go from being perfectly fine to being not perfectly fine based on a single determination. That's all. I'm not saying I'm going to vote against it. I'm just saying I have a little bit of a problem with that. And I've heard from other people that have problems with that.
And I get your concern. I don't think it's going to be applied arbitrarily. But I guess there is the you could get a. I'm not saying either of our animal control officers now would do this. But you could get a cartoon character animal control officer that's just against all feeding, no matter what it is. I guess in that instance you could have someone that's making a determination. I think the proper way to address that would be to appeal the decision to the town and say, hey, look, this is happening. I'm disagreeing with what's happening here, and this is why. And so yes, there's an added step for someone to have to go and to appeal this determination. But I think it's necessary if this is happening just 3 times a year to people. It's causing issues. The ability to at least add some teeth to the control with a animal control officer is important. Because what I don't like is regulations where there's nothing that backs up regulation. You put a regulation in, and then there's nothing to actually enforce regulation. That's where I get concerned. Where it's just a regulation for regulation's sake. If you have something in here, like we have on this page with the penalties and what's provided, which we currently don't have now, I think that's beneficial. Any further discussion? All right. Seeing none, roll call vote. Kathy?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Vicky?
Yes.
Amina?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Anita?
Yeah.
I'll vote yes as well. 7-0 in favor. Let's see what the next article is. I think we have 2 final articles here, if I'm not mistaken. They're both dealing with the sewer. Let me just make sure before I proceed.
We only had 1 more.
No, we have 2. 19 and 18. And out of abundance of caution, I'm going to recuse myself from discussion on Articles 18 and 19. Anita, I'll have you make the votes. I'll still control the slides, but I'm going to shut off my camera.
Do you
Okay,
have
I'll
a
make a
motion?
motion. I'll make a motion that we accept Article 18 sewer capacity study submitted by the town manager. I move that the town transfer from the Chelmsford Sewer System Capital Improvement Fund, $150,000 to provide for a study to determine the options to increase the capacity of the sewer system servicing the town of Chelmsford and the means to correct, remedy, repair, prevent, and prohibit any and all forms of infiltration or inflow from groundwater and other sources of leakage into pipes, facilities, and other components of the sewer system.
There's a whole lot more, Kathy, so I would suggest you do the standard rest of.
And
Yeah.
shall I just say add the rest as presented? Yeah.
Yeah.
And the remaining details as presented.
I'll second.
Discussion?
Sounds like it's long overdue.
Yeah, I personally am fine with us, spending some money to go and look at what our options are. I have a little bit of a concern about the piece that says looking also at, creating a sewer treatment center. Like I am, fundamentally opposed to that. Like I'm happy to look at options, but I would like that off the table, but I don't necessarily think that would deter me from voting in favor, but I am concerned because I don't want us to go down that path.
I mean, I agree with you. I don't want that in town either, but I think if we're going to do, a study, then I think all of the options need to be presented so that we're making, a fully informed decision once the study comes to us and town meeting.
Yeah,
I don't want one in town either.
Yeah, I agree. We need to look at all options.
I agree about looking at all options and with a real eye towards limiting, large, complex, additions to the town.
Do you mind if we flip through the next chart for this Article 18, please? Thank you.
So on that topic of the in-town option, sorry, I think it's on the next slide is where my question is, but if folks are still, Vicky, were you still reading? Sorry.
No, I wanted to continue. Thank you.
Okay. It's actually the next slide. So the 150 that's being proposed for this, it looks like the study itself is 90, and then there's 60 that would be dedicated towards actually investigating if the Southwell site would be a good spot for a facility in town. I don't know how this will be kind of put out to bid, but I'm assuming I don't know how that would work if we request a study, which includes at least looking at the concept of an in-town facility. Does that commit us to the full 150, or is there kind of a report back and a chance to say, all right, you included it in there, but we don't want to actually go do any field work and test the site? Because if we've already kind of ruled that out, we would have to spend the 60 grand. So I don't know how that works with the approval of the amount, or when that next decision is made of, yes, now go look at Southwell specifically. I'm assuming that involves, I don't know, soil samples and looking at the, testing the actual ground. So I don't know how that falls into the process.
I think just because we don't want one doesn't mean necessarily that the town as a whole and all of town meeting is going to say absolutely not, we don't want one.
Right, but but if we agree to this, are we then agreeing to spend the full 150, regardless of if there is a consensus in town or not? Like there's no step 2 to say go do the study, and then if we want to pursue it further, go look at the actual site we've identified.
That was one of my concerns too.
I think.
Oh yeah, because didn't we do this with another study last year, where we had multiple steps?
Remember what that was for?
No. I have COVID brain. You know, I'm home with my kids and they're, you know, you gotta be kidding me.
But I do think the reason why this is included for this, because otherwise you're not going to go down the path of creating a sewer treatment facility if you don't have the space or the area to do so, right? Like you can't, I think that's why they would include this, right? Like, do we even have, like, otherwise they would make a recommendation that no, you can't go down that path. Because there is, and I think this would be where the site was identified as such. But I don't disagree with you. Like, I personally would have liked to take that all off of that, go and look at what our options are.
When it was proposed, has anyone heard anything from the people that surround that particular property that they're considering? I can't imagine a septic.
I'm trying to remember, because I was on the tri-board. I dialed into the tri-board meeting that they brought up the whole sewer, and then I did dial into a couple of selectmen meetings, and I can't remember if that was even brought up, but I think this is the whole part of it, right? This is the whole, like, let's go see if that space is even feasible, that we could do it. So maybe even premature at this point.
Right. And the only reason why I say that is I think of you thinking of somebody 20 feet from your property. I think of me being next door to it, and I'm not, of course, to the septic treatment plant. And I've been to one or two of those from some previous board experience that I've had years ago. And I can tell you that that threw up a huge red flag for so many people that it wouldn't pass. So my thought is, you know, do we go into the first part of the study and then get to the point where we decide that, you know, the people surrounding it that really don't want it in their neighborhood, or that we decide we would or would not want it in that neighborhood, have some way of giving us some feedback with regards to the rest of the cost, if they're just able to propose that we not put it there in you know, retrospect.
You know, then it's a question of whether or not we spend the 60,000, like if even putting it on the table. Like, I personally think it's a waste of the town's money to create a, you know, sewer treatment center. I think we need to look at other options. You know, one of those options being, you know, going back to septic, you know, any new developments, you know, new additional add-ons, you know, could always go septic, and, you know, that's another option.
I guess I get that they're trying to, you know, the intent was, I think, I'm guessing the intent was to cover all the bases and look at everything, which makes sense. It's that the clause of if necessary. Well, who is deciding if it's necessary to spend 60 grand? If that's.
Paul, is Paul still with us?
Yes, I'm still here with you.
Thank you.
I share the same concerns you have. In other words, the request was for the full amount of the proposal, but I don't envision coming back and spending the 60 until we would report back to the select board and the whole community in terms of, this is what we found. Now, do we then proceed to do the field investigations at Southwell? And if that were the case, then it would allow us to get out and get the work done towards the spring months, as opposed to waiting till June following the spring town meeting. So again, it wouldn't be just you sign the contract and they go out and do everything. It's more of, we need 90 to get the study done, and then we then assess, do we then go forward with the next 60 if that's sort of the preferred direction, which I tend to think may not be the preferred direction ultimately, but I think we need to have that available in the event that turns out to be the way that, you know, it's worth at least exploring, because the viability of doing an in-house treatment system would depend upon what's out there. And you would sort of need to assess that in terms of whether you would then go to the next phase going forward. But again, I don't think you'd even do that unless that was sort of the preferred option.
And is that, Paul, in that scenario you just laid out, in your view, that next step of spending the 60 would be at the select board decision based on the initial report?
Yes, I'd come back to the select board and the community. I obviously I'd let you know where everything was at too, as finance committee, let the Board of Health know, and then see if there's some sense of consensus going forward that this is where we ought to go, and let's go out there and find out, is Southwell, a viable option? But again, it's one of many, and may not be the preferred one.
Okay.
Paul, did you get a lot of feedback from people within that area after this was released?
No,
What happened?
no, we really have not heard anything from that neighborhood or that area of town. Nor did we when we had that break this past summer either. I mean, it's kind of remote down there by the softball fields. But no, we did not hear anything.
Thank you.
So, I mean, I think, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, get over.
I was just going to say, I think based on that kind of approach that Paul outlined, again, it's not like we're committing to putting a facility in Chelmsford. And we're multiple steps away from even talking about that. I'm fine with just kind of leaving it as, I'm sure this will get some discussion at town meeting. But just to kind of keep the process moving, even if we do spend the 60 for the study after we get the report and the interested parties can say, again, that's still a long way from actually committing to anything. So instead of having to then wait and go through town meeting again to determine that next step and get funding, I would be okay with it as it is.
That's an excellent point. Thanks, Eric.
I agree. My only concern about that is, then, everything moves forward, and next thing you know, we are voting on a sewer treatment center, in Chelmsford at town meeting. I think, once the possibilities come out, then it should be presented to the town meeting reps. Do they want to go down the path of looking at potential sites that we could create that? Although, and if they say no, then let's not spend the money. If that's not what the residents want of this town, then why spend the money? And it'll help us focus on what is, the right path. Because, if money's no object, of course, that's probably the easiest way to go keep, hey, let's just go build our own treatment facility. But that may not be where we want to go, and that may not be where the town wants to go.
Yeah, I fully agree with that, Anita. I wouldn't argue either way, but and I expect that will probably get fleshed out at town meeting in a couple of weeks. But I think in advance of that, from where we stand now, I would be okay. I'm okay with this as it is, and again, it'll get attention at town meeting.
May I ask? Paul, does this give us any negotiation room in the future with the current provision that we have? If we go out and we determine that, there's a very good possibility that we could just create our own, or we go back to X and say, we would like to work with you, or we can create our own, would that minimize the cost for us in any way, shape, or form?
No, I don't see that. We would never build a facility that could handle all of Chelmsford's flow. And there is demand on the Lowell plant, not only by Chelmsford, but by Lowell and by Drake at this point in time. Okay. And so I don't think it gives us that kind of leverage. I think what it does is, if it gets to the point where a in-town treatment plant is a potentially serious option at Southwell, we can at least do the field work to find out what the potential for that is and what the cost of that may be. The concerns I have with Southwell, as you can imagine, is you've got a high water table, as we found out when we had that sewer main break. And you'd want to do that hydrology to see, is this, if it is a serious option, then what is the full potential cost for that serious option? But no, it doesn't give us the ability of leverage, saying, well, if you don't give us the right deal with Lowell, we'll just we'll just go on our own. The system isn't built that way, and the flows aren't built that way that you could do that. What you could do is you could probably build a plant potentially in North Chelmsford at Southwell, and perhaps take flow from Tingsboro to meet some of their needs, which may have different implications. But you really can't just pull out of Lowell and just change the whole flow and pipes and system that's there.
Thanks. I haven't been around long enough to have all of that, so I appreciate your insight.
Paul, how much resources from the town side would have to work to determine if the Southwell site would be, a viable option? Meaning, like, is this going to distract folks who work in the town from doing something else, right? Like, is this going to be a distraction? They have to spend a lot of amount of hours with this consultant?
No, we're not going to be using our forced labor for their investigation. You're right. It may take time for our town engineer, DPW director, but it's not going to affect our crews out in the field to do this analysis. And again, the field investigation would be a latter stage if it occurs at all.
Well, it could always be a friendly amendment to lop off the 60,000.
Yeah, I mean, that's my thought. If it's that's an option.
Anita, you ready to
Yeah, I was
take
just going to say, yeah, ready? Kathy, I'll go with you first. I don't know if I can keep the same order as Jim went, but hopefully I can. Kathy?
Yes.
Eric, I think you were second.
Yes. Yes, I was, and yes.
Amina?
Yes.
Vicky?
Yes.
Dave?
No.
I will vote no on this. Will entertain a friendly amendment, but I will vote no, and Jim is going to abstain. So that is 4-2 with one abstention. Okay, next article. Kathy?
Okay, wow. Okay, Article 19, general bylaw amendment to the connection to the sewer submitted by the town manager. I move that the town amend the town code, chapter 132, sewage disposal, section 132.2, connection to the public sewer by deleting the language shown in strike through and adding the language shown in underline, which read as follows. And I'm going to say as presented.
I'll second.
Discussion?
I think that there should be serious consideration given to limiting new permits, and I think that should be I think they have to pay attention to issuing going forward with new projects, because this is until this situation is resolved or clarified.
Yeah. Personally, as a resident of this town, I am okay if no more development happens. People updating their homes, adding additions, taking a certain property and making it, better, sure. But shoving more houses or more apartment buildings or more complexes, not so much. And, I think this helps, I think the sewer situation helps, keep, everything focused on bringing more commercial in, right? Because now, I don't know. I mean, I do understand why this is being presented, because there are properties out there that have been purchased. And right now we don't have the capacity to add these additional homes, complexes into our sewer line. So I do understand why this is, this proposal is out there. So at least this allowed them to maybe, build a treatment center for their complex, or a septic for their complex and what have you. I do get that. And I'm probably leaning toward approving this, but could be swayed.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact number. I thought I had jotted it down last time, but like the number of current properties in the town that are on, septic, the number was, it was very, 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 very small. So it wasn't like this would impact a lot of existing, homes. People, and I think the intent was if you have a private treatment, on your property and it's working, then we're not going to do anything about it. That's fine. And if you have issues, then this allows the Board of Health, I believe, to kind of step in.
Yes, and I think because now there's no final for, because we do have those pending projects. I think one of them is North Chelmsford, is it the UMass property, right? Like otherwise they have, like they're stuck connecting to our sewer. Paul, if this didn't get approved, what would happen with that development?
In the opinion of town council, nothing, because this is really a clarification, technical correction bylaw as opposed to a substantive bylaw. And that's why we removed the references regarding sewer commission to putting it to DPW and so forth. Whether or not this bylaw passes, the fact that the opinion of council is that there is no capacity in the system now that for something like UMass Lowell West Campus, so therefore they can't connect. So what, and if this bylaw is approved, that doesn't change. So council feels that they have the right to do a wastewater treatment plant regardless of whether it's clearly identified or not, because otherwise you'd be doing a taking of their property, which could create a liability issue for the town. So it's not substantive in that form in terms of the ability in that case of that large development where there's just no capacity to take people on or development on.
So if we don't pass this,
go ahead.
If this doesn't pass, then that they cannot develop that to.
No, they can develop it with a on-site wastewater treatment plant, because the way that if you look at the strike out language in the first motion there, he says that where is it? Which is now okay, maybe. Okay. That he's saying is that the owners have to have capacity in order for them to connect. Yeah, it's where it says they shall be required at their expense to install suitable toilet facilities therein and to connect such facilities directly to the public sewer in accordance with the sewer commission regulations. Well, the commission regulations say you have to have capacity to connect. So that's the problem, is you can't order somebody to connect if and someone can't be compelled to connect if you don't have the capacity for them to connect.
Considering this is a clarification, I'm in favor of this. It makes sense to me.
Yep, agreed.
I agree as well.
Any more discussion? All right, ready? Kathy?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Vicky?
Yes.
Amina?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
And I will vote yes, with 6-0 in favor. I think that wraps it up, or Jim? Come back now.
I'm out of the corner. Thanks, Anita. All right, that concludes our fall town meeting warrant articles. We've now provided recommendations on all 19, or at least the ones that which required a recommendation. Moving along in the agenda this evening, we're going to discuss timeline for the Finance Committee warrant book production. So we've got a pretty tight timeline, like we normally do, but especially because the way things landed this year, where we have the third Monday in October happening when it does, and such a late Labor Day holiday this year, that all things started a little later than usual. So all that being said, I think, Pam, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, we need to effectively have this book over to the town on Tuesday.
Yep, that's right. I called the printer today and said that I was planning to send it to them Tuesday. I'm ready, other than I'll put all the recommendations in and can send out what I have by the end of the day tomorrow.
Okay.
And then we just need the letter.
Yep. So what I would ask for the letter is that on the 2 articles in which I abstained, if someone else could author those, our responses to those 2 particular articles and the recommendations that were made for those. I'll, as I usually do, put together our responses for the others. If you had an opposing position, so say if you're, especially with the Article 18, which there were 2 and 4, I think it might make sense to have one person state why they did, one person state why they did not support the article. And then I think the only other one we had a departure was in Article 16. So Anita, since I think you're already taking the first crack at the 17 and 18 and 19, if you could also just do a quick excerpt for your position regarding 16. Okay. So yeah, quick timeline. We'll turn when we can. We always get it done. Discussion of concerning future meetings. So this ends our fall town meeting meetings. I don't anticipate that we'll have another meeting until, other than a tri-board meeting, which may occur. I don't know, Paul, what the feeling is in December or early January, depending on how things are proceeding at the time. I'm guessing it's going to be early January.
Yes, probably the second Monday in January would be the projection at this time.
Okay. And I'm assuming we'll have a regular budget schedule for the spring. And so we'll start our meetings either end of January or the very beginning of February, where we'll start with our first run through after the tri-board meeting, and then proceed from there with our meeting with our departments. What that meeting will look like, who knows? It may be very different from previous years. It may be a Zoom meeting or a phone call as opposed to an in-person meeting like we've done in the past, which does provide certain flexibility, but it also doesn't have a certain ability to go look at specific things that we might need to look at for, say, the police facilities, the fire facilities, DPW facilities, and so on. But with that meeting happening in January or February of next year, that will really be our next time we meet. Do we have any public comment?
I think somebody on the chat.
I'm looking right now. Chief?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
Yep. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, members of the board. I know it's a late night, so I just want to thank you for your support tonight. I'm mindful of the fiscal pressures the town manager discussed earlier tonight. I understand you have some difficult choices that you face. So I just want to thank the board for their support, not only for this station, but also for the gear appropriation tonight. So thank you.
You're very welcome, and thank you for your services and the services of your department.
Thank you, Jim.
Any further public comment?
Yeah, just one comment, Mr. Chairman, and it's probably a bit of an ominous note. And I know Gary's aware of this because he sent me this as well. The Massachusetts reported the largest one-day spike in COVID-19 cases since May, with 708 new cases reported today. So I'm just hopeful that we can get to town meeting at this point and get this in 3 weeks and get this action taken so that we can proceed. But obviously, we're obviously a bit alarmed with where things are trending in the last couple of weeks.
Certainly. So the current plan is in the gym. We will not have the fans going, although we probably won't need them as much. And I know they did cause a concern with sound issues But in listening to the moderator's report to the select board a few weeks prior, I know that they had looked into, and I know that the IT department and Ted Lutner had discussed this, the feasibility of having a online Zoom type town meeting, and just the concerns that were there with the ability to vote, the ability of people to access, and the concerns about where the votes are coming from and how they're authenticating them. I don't think that an online is at least in the cards right now. So if we do trend upward again and we aren't able to proceed with town meeting on the third Monday in October, do we have any? Would it just be a wait and see? I mean, there's nothing in this that's going to be so important. Whereas we don't have a budget going forward. Is what I'm looking at. And there's no amendments to last year's budget. It's in a free cash can stay in free cash until it's voted out of free cash. So I don't think there's a pressing concern to get anything on this on this warrant through. But I'm guessing that there's really no. It's a wait and see approach. There's no really a way to determine how we would hold another meeting because the feasibility of the online doesn't seem to be possible.
Right. Yeah, I mean, conceivably you could keep postponing and you could do a third quarter estimated bill, which could get you to probably around February, March timeframe. But what's the likelihood that things would improve during the winter months? And so that's what I'm saying. The hope has always been and continues to be let's get in, and the same thing with the school openings as well. Let's see if we can get in, get some weeks in, and then see where things are. So again, we'll see how things go in the weeks ahead.
Okay, thank you. Any further public comment? Seeing none and none in the chat. Any press questions? I'm not seeing any press. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Just a hand vote's fine.
Aye.
All right, keep your eyes out for the letter and for the book this weekend. And then it'll be published next Tuesday. So it'll be going up on the town's website first. So those that are concerned about getting availability and accessibility for it prior to town meeting, it'll be available through the documents portal on the website for the town. And then a physical copy will be available at the actual physical town meeting if and when it is held at the Chelmsford High School. Thanks, guys.
Thank
Have a good
you.
night. Stay safe.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.